Hi everyone, I'm Mike Abadi and welcome to VTblogosphereTV, episode number 36. We've been on a little bit of hiatus. Our last episode was right before Irene, and I know we're all picking up the pieces. But we are back. We are done from being out from underwater, and we are very, very lucky to have Jessamyn West with us here today.
Hi.
Jessamyn's, well, she's at core a librarian. Dare I say? Yeah,
I think that's accurate.
True. And she started librarian.net way back in the 20th century in 1999.
Just barely.
And she keeps call it a personal site, jessamyn.com.
Yep.
And is a community manager, moderator?
Community manager, yeah, community manager, community moderator. I help run a community website.
Which is Metafilter.
Metafilter.com.
And also, there's this stuff called paper, bindings, and books. Without a Net, Librarians Bridging the Digital Divide is out 2011.
Yep.
Extremely current. And that's actually, I would say, the heart and soul of what you're up to is access to technology and information.
I think so.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I mean, that's a librarian thing generally, and I've sort of taken it, everybody's got their angle, and my angle is the digital divide, people who aren't connected, getting them connected. I've been working with teaching people how to use technology since the mid-90s when I went to library school, and I sort of figured at some level I'd be teaching people how to use a mouse and teach people how to use email, and then at some point, I don't know what I thought was going to happen, everyone would learn, and then we'd go learn some other stuff.
Right.
And you know, I moved from Seattle, where I went to library school, to Vermont, and that may have been part of it, but generally speaking, there are still people that I'm teaching how to use a mouse and how to use email, and who are just getting on the internet for the first time, and that's super great, but it kind of opened my eyes even more than they already were to the fact that the divide, the people who aren't yet online, are really experiencing not only computers, but school and work and society differently if they're not interacting with it in many ways, including the internet. And for a lot of people who are interacting in many ways almost primarily with the internet, those people have a vastly different experience of what it means to have friends, to be an American, to plan an event, to do all this stuff. And so that's my, I guess, hobby horse, if you will, is opening people's eyes to that and helping them help other people who need guidance,
right.
getting that aspect of their life off the ground, if it's even what they want, and it isn't always.
So you found Vermont to be sort of high needs in terms of the digital divide and those who are still not hooked up, not on the web?
I think it's true for a lot of rural areas. I mean, a lot of people say, you know, technology trends move from the West Coast to the East Coast. So stuff, it used to be. So stuff starts in Silicon Valley, it starts in Seattle, it starts at Microsoft, it starts at Google, and it moves this way. Recently, that has been less true. There's a whole bunch of technological hotbeds, you know, Research Triangle, Boston area, that kind of thing.
Right.
But for people in rural areas especially, and especially places where traditional values, whatever you kind of decide that means, are important, adapting new things, whatever the new things are, is usually something that happens more slowly. In Vermont, we have the sort of twofer issue where most of our population is rural, and we have the kind of combination of rivers and mountains and terribly punishing winters, all of which make infrastructure really, really difficult. So some of it is cultural, people who are not interested, and some of it is technological. People live places where you can't get any other internet other than maybe satellite or maybe 3G or 4G on your phone.
Right.
And in order to even get to the point where you would do something like pay for something very expensive like satellite, you'd have to understand why the internet was important in the first place. Yeah. So it's a great combination. What we like to say, not needy so much, is that Vermont kind of lives in a technological shadow in a lot of ways. That there's a obliteration sort of what might be useful or what might have utility, and it trickles down so that you know, the people who work in your libraries don't know as much about technology, the people who work at your schools don't know as much about technology, and they're the ones who are making decisions that then filter down into the rest of the community. People in your government, same thing. So not in a bad way exactly, but in a, there's a lot of opportunity to do a lot way, is sort of my upbeat spin on it.
Okay. Actually, I mentioned to someone that didn't actually know you were at root a librarian, and they said, "What do we need librarians for anymore with the internet and this sort of you know, free-floating access to information?"
Sure.
I don't know if you've ever heard that before. That you know, the library will become obsolete as sort of the utopian vision of the internet. There's been a lot of visions painted for.
Well, and I have two responses to that. I mean, number one, for people who are like, "Oh, you don't need the library anymore. If you, you know, everything's on Google." Like, have you ever watched somebody use Google? I mean, especially if you know how to use Google. People don't understand necessarily what a search engine is. They don't understand what it can access. They don't understand what it can't access, which I think is almost as important. And they don't understand, you know, why some stuff is on the internet, why some stuff isn't, what's authoritative and what's not, that kind of thing. So just in terms of information, the raw bits and bytes, not what it means or not what it means for us as a culture, it's really not true that that's all available that way, period. Just not true, number one. Number two, even if it were, people couldn't find it. They need assistance and guidance. Maybe that doesn't need to happen in the library, but that is where a lot of it's happening. Educational areas, library areas, work areas. And number two, you know, the library does a lot of things that aren't just connecting you with your data fact. You know, we offer community spaces. We offer, you know, a way for people to access the information that's relevant and interesting to them in a uncensored, gatewayed way. And, you know, when more and more of our information is being brokered through massive corporations, that's really important. It's really important to have an unbiased source of information, both for sort of, I'm trying to get a job, but also for like, I'm trying to learn about people like me. And what you want is not somebody to answer that question by trying to sell you something, which is really kind of what the first step is once you've typed something into Google. If you don't know what's going on, the responses that you get, the dark ones on the top and on the side, those are advertising. I know that. There's maybe some tiny text that says that.
No, it isn't, right.
And observing novice users over the last 20 years, they don't know that. So if we know they don't know that, and we continue to deliver them content in that way, it's got to be clear that sort of access to unbiased information is not the number one goal of Google. And it shouldn't be, maybe. Google's a company and they've got their own goals, but it is the goal of the library.
Right.
And I really think that, and 97% of Americans have some public library that services them, so it's it's one of the few ways you can reach everybody besides being the post office or the telephone company. So I think it's a really unique and important institution, and I'm not too worried. I mean, I'm worried about the perception, but I'm not actually too worried about the reality.
I know working with students, they often, when they're doing internet research, they'll come back and say, you know, I couldn't find anything, and I'm frustrated.
Sure.
So any you know, quick tips how to actually find something that isn't trying to sell you something?
Well, I always tell people, I mean, a lot of the things that you can actually do are starting. Even if you start with Google, learning how to sort of limit your results too. For instance, when I'm looking up stuff and I'm looking for good medical information, which is something a lot of people do all the time, and is really hard to find unbiased information because pharmaceutical companies would love you to just
click here.
And so learning how to limit your searches to authoritative sites. If you're not sure what an authoritative site is, that's when you can ask a person, or you can, you know, you can look at a library website. Like, for instance, if you start at the Medical Library Association, and I'm not saying that realistically students would do this, but that their teachers could do this to determine which sites start out authoritative. National Institute of Health, for example, the Mayo Clinic. Like, there are a lot of really good authoritative sources of health information, starting there and then making sure you got your spelling correct, and a bunch of other stuff can help you get there. But I think a lot of it is like a lot of education or a lot of pedagogy. You have to talk to somebody who's been there already, who can help guide you, and hopefully the next time you're set to do it yourself, and then as you do that slightly more, maybe you can teach someone else. But I think a lot of people feel that Google's so easy, if you can't use it, you're the problem. And I think that's rude, and I think it's unkind. But I also think it's not accurate. You know, we all learned how to do it.
Yeah.
Many of us may have just learned at a point where we weren't aware that we were learning. But a lot of times when people are motivated, which maybe isn't always the case when you're looking up hangnails on Google, you can often do better. And so what I also tell people is to try and find topics that people find really engaging, and they'll be a little bit more motivated to be like, well, I can't find anything on gun control. Well, what if you look up firearms legislation, that kind of thing? And they'll be like, oh, okay. And then they have a little bit of a renewed sense of purpose. I mean, pop culture things, pornography, like all of that stuff will get somebody doing the work. And so you've got to figure out what those things are for the people who you're interacting with. Figure out what motivates people to go find it and make it a genuine option for them. Right,
right. It's funny when something that now seems intuitive, it obviously wasn't. I mean, the Google page isn't structured to your, you know, your nervous system.
It's made to be simple, and it's made to return a lot. You know, it's made to give you a lot of recall. And Google works on relevance, but relevance is a tricky issue. I mean, these are library terms kind of, but recall is you get a lot of stuff. Relevance is you get the stuff that is what you wanted.
Recall, relevance.
Recall and relevance are the two things. So Google is great with the recall. Relevance sort of depends what you think is relevant and what a kid might think is relevant versus what I might think is relevant versus what a teacher might think is relevant. And they've got all their advertisers, which, you know, they claim don't affect their search algorithms. And I'm not saying that's not true, but it is something you have to sort of think about, as opposed to like you come to the library and you're looking up stuff. I'm not trying to sell you. Like, what would I be trying to sell you? Like, I want you to have a good user experience in the library, and it's all about you, which I think is important. I think is important.
Right. You had a nice turn of phrase there, and I got to grab onto it. I think you said information brokered by large corporations, which reminds me of pending legislation in the federal Washington House and Senate. Protect IP Act, I believe, is in the Senate, and it's actually co-sponsored by our very own Patrick Leahy. And SOPA, geez, I don't even know what it stands for in the House. Something. I'm sure the P is protect.
I wish I could remember. I was keeping track of them really well.
But a broad outline of what these bills would do, and I've really heard this, you know, the potential to break the internet or the sort of ruin its democratic structure. If you could help us understand what's going on.
I understand what the problem is, and I sort of understand how they're trying to solve it. So the problem is there are tons of places on the internet where you can go and get other people's copyrighted stuff. So, like, if I don't want to watch Big Bang Theory when it's on Thursday, I can go to the internet and find, well, I can watch it at CBS.com, actually. But maybe I don't want to do that. Maybe I want to own it. I want to watch it on my phone. Who knows what I want to do? You know, there's places you can go where people are basically freely sharing copyrighted content that the license holders, in this case CBS or whoever, makes them crazy, right? So like MediaShare, MediaFire, RapidShare, the Pirate Bay, going to places for torrenting. There's lots of different ways to get stuff you should pay for according to the marketplace for free on the internet. This bothers copyright holders because they feel like it's biting into their revenue stream. So that's the problem. Scribd, for example. You know, I have my book, right, and we sell it, and every time I sell it, I make a couple bucks. If somebody were giving my book away for free on the internet, they scanned the whole thing, or they have PDFs of the whole thing, and they put it up on Scribd.com, anyone who wanted could get a free copy. Why would people buy it anymore? That's the problem. So the way that they've decided to address this is by making that more of a crime than it already is. So right now...
It is already a crime, right? I mean, there is...
Yeah, I mean, right now, if you think that your copyrighted stuff is up on MediaFire, RapidShare, or whatever, you drop them a DCMA, you know, DMCA, Digital Millennium Copyright, you send them a nasty letter and say, get my stuff off your website, and they do. But it's a big net with a lot of big holes in it. It's a little difficult. Because once you take one copy off, of course, the great thing about digital information is you can make 1,000 copies as easy as you can make 2. So you get one copy down, there's 1,000 more copies, and as soon as people know you're trying to protect your copyrighted stuff, they go crazy distributing it as many places as possible. It's just this ongoing war. So what this, as I understand it, is attempting to do is make the sites have difficulty staying in business if they are the sort of site that deals in this sort of thing. So instead of saying, hey, Scribd, take it down, they're like, hey, Scribd, you're not going to be in business anymore. We're going to basically not allow people to access your site if you're the kind of site that is trafficking. I mean, it's like drug forfeiture laws. You know, somebody sold drugs out of your house, we're just going to take it. It's actually almost exactly like that. I don't know why I didn't kind of clue into this before. Something illegal happened in your space, we're just going to take your space. And they do it through sort of a complicated mechanism that's not really worth going into, but it's in a way that would enable people to essentially say, you can no longer have this website if you use it for these reasons. And the reasons are vague enough that people's concern is you could allege that someone was doing this, get their site taken down. So let's say you're, you know, these people and you hate these people and you're both doing whatever. You have a blog, 2 blogs, and they fight. You say that your blog...
That happens?
I know! You say that your blog enemies are hosting copyrighted content and their site gets shut down because of the mechanisms that don't really work in this legislation. And all of a sudden, you know, you're living large and they're not, and people feel like it could be misused. And I think the larger issue is it doesn't solve the problem. I mean, it's a problem. You know, this ongoing thing is a problem. I'm not so sure it's as big of a revenue bite problem as people think. I really think what's going on is people are watching the business model change and they're unhappy, and they blame the people who they can obviously see are doing something to their business model, and at the same time, maybe that's not why their business model isn't succeeding. And in fact, there's been a lot of research that says that music piracy isn't what's killing the music business. It's music executives and a whole bunch of other things. So it's a very contentious issue. I have a very strong opinion that is not representative of all librarians or anybody else. But I feel like people need to understand these mechanisms in order to be able to work against them or work with them, or to have an opinion. You need to understand, say, what's a blog, what's DNS, what's piracy, what's copyright, how does that work? And that's really hard. Those are not easy problems, and so even to have an opinion, you have to understand these. Again, this is my digital divide thing. People who haven't gotten an email account don't even get what's wrong with this legislation, much less how they'd steal a song, for example.
Right. That's actually really helpful analogy with the drug forfeiture case. Essentially, if in the good old days, I guess only the drug would be confiscated, but sort of now they can take your house in a similar fashion. Now, instead of just take that one thing down, it would be now they can shut your website down. And I know, as an example, what you're saying, Daily Kos has been finding a lot of new users posting 100%, just going to Huffington Post, copying someone's article, basically setting them up for a shutdown if this were ever
provocateuring.
That's I mean,
is what they call it, and then that means if you have strong opinions and then you have enemies, again, like, oh, that happens on the internet? I mean, everybody at the internet is always mad at each other. And so if you have enemies, or if you're popular, Daily Kos, incredibly popular website, people there tend to espouse a specific set of opinions. If you disagree with those opinions, you can now go after them using this sort of thing, because they allow people to have their own blogs. And so on your own blog, whatever, you can post child pornography, you can post, I mean, that won't last very long, but it's a great way to take the people with the unpopular opinions in your mind and actually make it impossible for them to do business. And there's laws against that in America for brick and mortar businesses, you know, defamation and libel and slander and whatever. But the you know, internet world is kind of a big wild frontier, and people don't understand these mechanisms. As a result, we're less empowered to defend ourselves against them. You see it all the time. People trying to take down a website by pretending to be sympathizers, but then being jerks and then causing problems. Concern trolling is another thing you call it.
Yeah. Now, you're really getting at the issue of community moderation. And I imagine you've run into that with Metafilter and maybe also with your work on the advisory board for the Wikimedia Foundation. So I guess first up, I'm wondering, do you, as a librarian, do you consider Wikipedia a solid go-to source?
Everybody wants to know that. And here's what I tell people about Wikipedia. I personally love Wikipedia. I use it all the time. I like it. I work to make it better. I'm an editor, which is unusual, sort of unusual. But, you know, I think like a lot of things, Wikipedia is a great first step to get started with your topic. And in many cases, it's the only place you're going to get a lot of information on your topic that's current. So for instance, I teach a digital pictures class. People want to know, what's a JPEG? Why do they call it JPEG? Where did JPEG come from? Finding that in a book is complicated. Finding it on Wikipedia takes about 5 minutes. You read it. If you're not sure about it, you go to the bottom of the article. There's sources. The sources are links to actual information from other places. One of Wikipedia's rules, and it's not a rule that's consistently applied, but it's fairly consistently applied, is no original research. So everything needs to be cited, and you go follow citations just like you would in any other research, and you figure out if you agree with it. People have a hard time with that because it takes extra work, because they don't like it when their opinions are wrong, because whatever. And there are cases in which Wikipedia is wrong. You read a sentence, it's wrong. Happens. You know, and find me a good book on astronomy that still talks about Pluto as a planet, we'll talk. You know, it's wrong in different directions than other research materials, but I feel like the citations and understanding the concept of a citation is really useful for people who are really curious. People are going to use it wrong, sure. People read the newspaper and get the wrong idea. People talk to their neighbor and get the wrong idea. So I don't say I stand behind everything on Wikipedia as the authoritative last word on stuff, but I think it's a great place to go to get overviews, to find citations. And one of the things about Wikipedia, speaking to what you were saying before, it's interesting. Kids find it interesting, people find it interesting, and this is my favorite part, all the content on Wikipedia is free for you to reuse for any purpose whatsoever. You find a picture on Wikipedia, you can put it in your book. I use pictures from Wikipedia in my book because they're free. Free like beer, free like speech. And so that's helpful for people who don't want to get bogged down or who are confused by copyright and want to do the right thing. You're able to use this content for whatever you want. You can sell it. You can use it, you can print it, you can set it on fire. It doesn't matter. And I think that's really nice for people who have been scared by threats of not being able to use music, a video, a song, content, a picture.
Who says that?
It calms people down.
Yeah. So what is it, Wikipedia Commons? Is that what they have a sort of?
Wikimedia Commons.
Wikimedia Commons. And the Wikimedia Foundation is, Wikipedia is just one of many things the Wikimedia Foundation does?
Wikimedia Foundation is like an umbrella organization that runs, it's kind of the guiding principles and is the board for the giant nonprofit empire that is the Wikimedia set of things. So it's Wikipedia in a million different languages, it's Wikimedia Commons, it's Wikiquote, it's Wikidictionary, it's Wiktionary, a whole bunch of those things. They do the conference every year, the Wikimania. It's kind of weird you say it, it just sounds weird after a while. Wiki, is that a word? But yeah, they run that organization, help keep it solvent, help, you know, set its sort of guiding strategic planning and that kind of stuff, and I advise them. They ask me questions about stuff, and I'm like, whoa, this is what I think. And there's a lot of librarians who are involved in it at various levels, but I don't know, I may be the only one that's on the advisory board.
I'm seeing we don't have terribly much time, which is a damn shame, but I'd like to actually get us to, at librarian.net, you've been keeping tabs on the Occupy Wall Street movement through their I don't know what to call them, grassroots libraries on site in...
The Occupy libraries, basically. The Occupy...
What's going on there?
The large different Occupy groups, so like Boston and San Francisco and New York, and I don't know about the other ones. I haven't kept sort of a list. Many of them have had these grassroots libraries, which are actual spaces with stuff, books, content. A lot of times they have computers with internet access, and they make them available for people involved in the Occupy movement to use. It kind of sprung out of, and they're not totally connected, but sort of the radical reference movement, which started around the times of the Republican National Convention, I think in 2004, you'll have to check.
Radical reference?
Radical reference. The whole idea that activists can be helpful, librarians who are activists, and there's lots of them, can be helpful by being at protests, events, whatever, and providing useful, unbiased information to people who wander off and say, what's going on? Or people who are like, where's the first aid station? Or people who are like, I don't understand anti-capitalism. Mm-hmm. So they provide specific content and information. So these libraries, pretty interesting, sprung up almost all individually in this sort of odd grassroots way to provide reference and information and a space and access to technology for the people who were involved, either as protesters or as passersby saying, what is this about? Super useful. And they had blogs, they had books, they had lending libraries. You could go to Library Thing and see what the Occupy Wall Street Library in New York had. Very cool, very interesting from a library perspective, because that kind of on-the-fly reference is, I think, one of the things that we don't do as well in our little buildings, but we really can do if we're a little bit more mobile and out sort of where our people are, however you define our people.
Right. One of the other big utopian arguments about the internet maybe a decade ago was that, with online activism, we won't, like, physically showing up somewhere as a number of people won't really matter so much, but this Occupy movement really shows that actually making a physical presence somewhere,
I think they've both still got utility. I mean, I think one of the things that got Obama elected was that lots of people could each give him $5, $10, $20 on the internet really easily, and he could do a lot of fundraising that way. But, people still interact in a real way world. The internet isn't a substitute. Yeah. For real world interaction. In fact, in a lot of ways, it's just a complement or a supplement to getting to interact with people in real life, I think, and that's one of my guiding principles. Right, right. Much like the library itself is not now obsolete. I know, exactly. It's more valuable than ever. In fact, there's more stuff we're swimming in, and there's more need for sorting, huh? And if you claim the internet is as important as it is, having people to help you navigate and understand it, super important, yeah. Amen. Thanks a lot, Jessamyn. Thanks for having me. That was a lot. We got a lot in there. Check out this book, Without a Net, Librarians Bridging the Digital Divide. Congrats. Thanks very much. And thanks for keeping an eye on these issues, because they continue to, boy, you think, oh, isn't the digital divide like 10 years ago? Isn't everyone online now? 20%. 20% of Americans don't have any internet at home. There's the number. All right. Take care, people. Good night. Thank you. Various competing explanations for an economy that is, in many respects, without precedent in our annals. The most compelling appears to be the extraordinary surge in technological innovation that developed through the latter decades of the last century. Economists, for example, like to talk about speed limits for the economy. Do we have higher speed limits today? Do they exist anymore? How do we measure the impact of technology in this economy?